She slid the papers across the table while I was still wearing the hospital bracelet. Not the next morning. Not after a week of processing. That same night, the same Tuesday in February, where a doctor in a gray blazer had spent 45 minutes explaining to me exactly how my own body was trying to kill me. I drove home from Methodist Hospital in Houston with the heater on, thinking about what I wanted for dinner. Instead, I walked into my kitchen and found my wife of 22 years sitting across from a legal envelope like she'd been waiting for a bus. She looked calm. That's the part I couldn't get past. Completely calm. I want to be honest with you right now. Before I go any further, I have told this story maybe 3 times in my life. Once to my brother, once to a counselor I saw twice and never called back, and once at 2 a.m., standing over a sink, rinsing out a bowl I hadn't eaten from. I'm telling it now because I think some of you have been in rooms that felt exactly like that kitchen, and I think you deserve to know what happens on the other side of them. My name is Ray Callahan. I'm 53 years old. I run a small plumbing and HVAC company out of Pasadena, Texas, and 6 years ago, in the span of about 11 minutes, I found out I had aggressive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and that my marriage was over. Those 2 pieces of news did not arrive in that order. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee. Sharon had one of those drip pots she left running all day, and by evening the bottom half was basically tar. I noticed that. I noticed the clock above the stove had a crack running through the plastic face. I noticed she was wearing the cream cardigan I'd given her for Christmas 3 years earlier. Funny how the brain catalogs the wrong things when it's panicking. The envelope sat between us like a third person at the table. I asked if she'd already spoken to an attorney. She said yes. Then she folded her hands together and told me calmly, almost rehearsed, that 1 round of chemotherapy could financially obliterate us. She said us, but the way her hands were folded, it was pretty clear she meant her. 22 years. And that was her opening sentence. I pulled out a chair slowly. My legs felt strange, disconnected not from the diagnosis, just from trying to process what was happening in the room around me. I sat down. I looked at her. I said, "I'm going to fight this." Sharon looked down at the table for a second. When she looked back up, there wasn't cruelty in her eyes. That would have been easier. There was just distance. Like she'd already moved on so far inside her head that this conversation was a formality. She said she was 46 years old and she wasn't going to spend what she called the good years watching someone deteriorate. I had cancer cells trying to hijack my lymph nodes. She was worried about the good years. Somewhere behind me, I heard the upstairs floor creak. My daughter Cassie was 16. She had a habit of sitting at the top of the stairs when she was worried, thinking we couldn't hear her. Parents always hear. I looked toward the hallway. Sharon didn't lower her voice. I picked up my phone because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I opened the banking app automatically, the same way you check your phone at a red light, not for any reason, just a reflex. Our joint checking account balance loaded, $4,211. I stared at the number. That account had held over $87,000 4 days earlier. I scrolled up. Transfer after transfer, each one dated over the previous 72 hours. And then on the final one, in the memo field, 4 words. This should help some. I put the phone down on the counter. I didn't throw it. I didn't yell. I just set it down carefully, like setting down something breakable. That memo line hit harder than the divorce papers, harder than the diagnosis, because it meant she hadn't panicked. She hadn't reacted. She had planned this while I was at appointments and labs and imaging rooms trying to figure out if I was going to live. She had sat in this kitchen and moved the money in increments, and then she had written that note, and that note was supposed to, what, make me feel considered. I looked at her and said, "This was already done before tonight, wasn't it?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Cassie appeared at the doorway in sweatpants and an old Astros hoodie. She couldn't have been standing there more than 10 seconds, but she'd heard enough. She looked at her mother with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not anger, not sadness. Just a kind of slow, clear-eyed recognition, like something she had suspected for a long time had just been confirmed. "Mom," she said. Sharon stood up and told her to go back upstairs, and then she said the sentence I keep returning to, even now, years later. She said she refused to sacrifice her future because a situation had become medically inconvenient. Medically inconvenient. The room went so quiet I could hear the drip of that burnt coffee pot. Cassie stared at her mother. Then she looked at me. I tried to signal with my eyes that it was okay, that she should go, that I had this under control. I did not have this under control, but she went upstairs anyway, and I heard her door close softly, which meant she was trying not to wake the neighbors, which meant she was being more composed than I was. Sharon was gone within 4 days. She moved into a high-rise condo near the Galleria with a man named Bryce Holloway, who I eventually met when he pulled a white Range Rover into my driveway while I was hauling garbage cans to the curb. He was tall, good shoes, the kind of haircut that requires maintenance. He stepped out and said, "Hey man, no hard feelings, right? You gotta protect your frequency in this life." He actually said frequency. He was talking about frequency. I looked at him for a moment. Then I went back to the garbage cans. Chemo started 3 weeks later. My first infusion lasted almost 7 hours at the cancer center off Fannin Street. You notice strange things in oncology rooms. The quiet, the warmed blankets, the specific way time moves differently when everyone around you is fighting something. Across from me, an older man in his 70s held his wife's hand while she slept. He rubbed lotion onto her knuckles without waking her. He didn't look sad. Exactly. He looked like a man doing the only thing that mattered. I was sitting there alone reading a fishing magazine I'd grabbed from the waiting room rack. I wasn't reading it. I was just holding it. When I finally walked out that evening exhausted and nauseated in a way I had no vocabulary, for Cassie was standing in the parking garage with 2 gas station coffees and a bag from a donut shop on Westheimer. She held them up. "1 coffee, 1 hot water," she said. "Google says too much caffeine is rough during treatment." She had made note of it. She had researched this. My 16-year-old daughter had researched my chemotherapy protocols so she could bring me the right drink. I almost couldn't walk to the car. The months after that moved like something underwater, slow and blurred and exhausting in a way that didn't register until later. I ran the business between treatments. There were mornings I drove to job sites feeling like I was operating from inside someone else's body. One afternoon in Pearland, I had to sit on a customer's lawn for 15 minutes because my legs started shaking while I was working on an outdoor unit. The homeowner came out with water. "You doing okay there?" "Yeah," I said. "Just old." He laughed. I laughed too. Then I sat there wondering how I'd gotten old so fast. I forgot laundry in the machine so long the clothes mildewed. I burned food because chemo brain made me wander mid-task. I once tried to make canned soup for Cassie and had to step outside to keep from getting sick from the smell. Then I came back in and made her finish her calculus homework at the table while I sweated through my shirt. We didn't talk about it. That was how we handled things. The hardest single day came in July. I sold my base boat, an older Ranger model I'd bought when Cassie was 9. We used to take it out on Lake Conroe on summer mornings and she'd fall asleep in the front with her feet on the cooler. I sold it because Sharon had abruptly decided that Cassie's private school was an expense she was no longer willing to contribute to. The buyer drove away in the late afternoon light, towing it behind his truck. I sat in the garage staring at the empty spot on the floor where the trailer dolly used to sit. I cried the way you only cry when you're alone and no one is coming hard, soundless. The kind that makes your ribs hurt. Not for the boat. For the life that used to live in that space. For the version of things I'd assumed would just keep going. I fell asleep on the couch that night with the television on low. Sometime around midnight I half woke to the sensation of something being tucked around my shoulders. Cassie, she didn't say anything. Just adjusted the blanket carefully the way you do when you're trying not to wake someone. I mumbled something. "Sorry." Or "thank you." I don't remember which. She said, "Don't be stupid, Dad." Then she went back upstairs. For the first time in months, I slept until morning. 3 years passed, not in a montage, not in any way that felt meaningful at the time. Just paperwork, insurance calls, early mornings, the business surviving because Houston summers don't care about your lymphoma when a unit goes down in August. Someone calls, and you go. The tumors eventually went quiet. Remission is the word they use, like the disease has just gone to another room. Nobody warns you adequately that remission isn't a finish line. My hands tingled for a year from nerve damage. Every follow-up scan turned me into a different person for 3 days beforehand. Anxious, restless, convinced. Cassie developed a ritual. On every scan day, she showed up with coffee and something sweet from a bakery near our neighborhood. "Doctors can't deliver bad news while people are eating pastries," she told me the first time. It became our superstition. After one particularly clean result, she raised her cup in the hospital parking garage and said, "Congratulations, you're still annoyingly alive." I laughed so hard I spilled half of mine on the concrete. There were bad moments too. Steroids during treatment messed with my mood in ways I'm not proud of. One evening, Cassie came home late from debate practice without texting. and I came apart at her when she walked through the door, not screaming, just loud in the specific way that makes a kid's face go still. She said, "My phone died, Dad," and the second she said it, I sat down at the table and covered my face with both hands. "I'm sorry," I said. She walked over and hugged me without saying anything, which somehow made it worse. Bryce, meanwhile, had turned himself into a kind of lifestyle brand, posted videos online standing beside cars he clearly rented. Quotes like, "Lions don't explain themselves to sheep." Cassie showed me one once at breakfast and I inhaled coffee wrong. At some point he started attending Cassie's school events, not because she invited him, but because Sharon photographed everything. Cassie tolerated it. That's the thing about kids in these situations that people underestimate. They'll absorb enormous amounts of emotional discomfort to keep peace with a parent they still love. Cassie kept trying. She kept calling Sharon. She kept being polite at dinners she hadn't asked for. Sharon sent gifts instead of presents. One birthday, a designer handbag arrived with a card that misspelled Cassie's middle name. Cassie read the card, set it on the counter, and went back to her AP Physics notes without comment. Another year, a gift card for a store she'd never shopped at. No call, just money, like tipping a parking attendant. Bryce crossed a clear line the day he commented on Cassie's senior photos online. She'd posted a nice set, simple white dress, trees near the bayou, nothing dramatic. He wrote, "Looking great, kiddo." She showed me the next morning at breakfast. I put my fork down. I said, "That man is strange in a way that's not funny." Cassie looked physically repelled. Sharon, when told, said it was just his sense of humor. That was the last time Cassie made an excuse for her mother. Then came the letter. A rainy Thursday in March. I found the envelope in the mailbox between a grocery circular and an electric bill. Cassie was home. She opened it standing in the kitchen while a frozen pizza cooked in the oven. And the second she started crying, I knew. She kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." She'd gotten into Rice University's engineering program, full merit consideration, in Houston, 20 minutes from our house. I hugged her until she made a noise indicating I was compressing her rib cage. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table holding the acceptance letter. Not because Rice was famous, though it was, but because there had been months during chemotherapy where I had genuinely, quietly, made my peace with the possibility that I wouldn't be there for this. I had laid in a hospital recliner watching an IV drip and thought, I just want to see her finish. And here was the finish. Here it was on paper, sitting in my hands under the kitchen light. A few days later, Sharon called. Video call, first in over a year. She looked different, more done around the eyes. Bryce wandered through the background in athletic wear holding a smoothie. Sharon said she was proud. She said it was time to think about being a family again. Then she mentioned she could help with Rice tuition, housing, whatever was needed. Bryce leaned into the frame. We should celebrate big. Successful people deserve their wins. I watched Cassie's face go completely flat, not angry, just finished, the expression of someone who has run out of language for a feeling they've had too many times. After the call, she sat at the table spinning her phone slowly on the surface. Then she asked me a quiet question. Do you think money can fix what people break? I thought about saying yes. Life would have been simpler if it did. Instead, I told her the truth. No, I said. It just helps them feel less guilty about the breaking. She nodded. Then she opened her textbook and didn't bring it up again. But something had shifted. I could feel it. Graduation day arrived in May, which in Houston means you're already sweating at 6 in the morning. I was in the parking lot of a Walgreens at 5:45 a.m., pressing wrinkles out of my dress shirt against the center console of my Ford Escape, using a travel iron I'd borrowed from my brother and a plastic bag of water as a steam source. I want to be clear, I had planned ahead and still ended up ironing my shirt in a parking lot. That's the kind of person I am. The ceremony was at Smart Financial Center in Sugar Land. I got there early. I wanted a good seat. Cassie had spent enough time in waiting rooms for me. The least I could do was make sure I could see her walk across a stage without obstructions. I found her near the staging area at 7:15. She was in her gown, honor cords. The blue rice stole across her shoulders. She saw me across the room and smiled. There is something about seeing your child in a graduation gown that catches you completely off guard. One second you're thinking about where you parked. The next you're remembering them, asleep in the front of a bass boat, with their feet on a cooler. You got here embarrassingly early, didn't you? She said. I said yes. She took the coffee I was holding. For about 20 minutes, everything felt quiet and good. Then Bryce Holloway walked in. You could smell him before you saw him, some aggressive cologne that hit the air like a weather event. Sharon followed in a white pantsuit and oversized sunglasses she had not removed, despite being indoors. Bryce was live streaming on his phone and carrying a gift bag the size of a carry-on suitcase. Big day, he announced to the general population of the room. Several parents turned around. Nobody had asked. Sharon swept toward Cassie and pulled her into a long hug, the theatrical kind, the kind calibrated for an audience. Cassie hugged her back, but with her arms, not her body. Bryce pointed the camera at them. My stepdaughter's graduating, he told the live stream. Cassie visibly flinched at the word stepdaughter. I noticed. I looked away. Sharon finally looked at me. Something complicated moved across her face for half a second, maybe guilt, maybe just discomfort. Then she replaced it with a tight social smile. David, she said, you look well, not happy, not good, well, like she was commenting on a houseplant she hadn't killed yet. Morning, Sharon, I said. Bryce extended his hand. No hard feelings, man. I looked at his hand and then back at Cassie, who was actively biting the inside of her cheek, trying not to laugh. That bought me 30 seconds of joy before he started talking again. He paced around filming things, decorations, programs, other families. At one point he announced to his live stream, success leaves clues. People. At a high school graduation, success leaves clues. I had no idea what he meant, and I do not believe he did either. Sharon kept making small comments disguised as observations. Emma's always had so much ambition, she said. Emma. Cassie's name is Cassie. Purdue would have been great too, but some of us aimed higher. Little cuts, the kind that sound neutral until you know the history that makes them land. Then Bryce announced he had a surprise. Outside in the parking lot, staged near the main entrance where maximum foot traffic would pass, was a brand new red Corvette Stingray, with a white satin ribbon across the hood. People stopped. Phones came out. Bryce spun the key fob around one finger like he'd been practicing that move privately. Only the best for our girl, he said. Sharon smiled at the small crowd that had gathered. You deserve a future bigger than what you've known, sweetheart. I became very aware of my escape 3 rows over. The rust patch near the rear wheel well, the mismatched hubcap on the driver's side, the crack in the rear windshield wiper mount I'd been meaning to fix for 8 months. Cassie looked at the car for a long moment. Then she said, that seems like a lot. Bryce laughed. That's scarcity thinking, he said. Sharon glanced at him, and I caught the quick irritation in her eyes. Even she knew he sounded ridiculous. Then she turned back to Cassie. Your father's always been practical. There was something underneath it, a small blade. I looked toward the parking lot. Honestly, part of me hoped Cassie would just take it. I know how that sounds. But Rice wasn't cheap. The business was stable, not comfortable, and no matter how much you've been hurt, some part of you just wants your kid financially protected, even by people who hurt you. That's the part that made the next few minutes complicated, because while I was swallowing all of that quietly, Sharon leaned toward Cassie and said, softly but not quietly, you don't want your whole life to look like your father's, sweetheart. Then she glanced at my suit. He's a good man, but he never had vision. I felt my stomach drop. Not because it hurt me. I had been through enough by then that Sharon's opinion of my suit registered somewhere below a parking ticket. What it did was something else entirely. It lit up Cassie's face with an expression I had seen exactly once before in my life, the morning a boy shoved another girl on a middle school bus and Cassie, 8 rows back, quietly stood up. Bryce dangled the Corvette key toward her with a grin. Cassie reached out and took it slowly. She looked at it. Then she looked at me, and I felt something in my chest tighten, because I recognized what was coming, the way you recognize a change in weather. She turned to face the small crowd that had gathered around the car. Her hand was trembling slightly. When she started speaking, her voice came out quieter than usual. She said, I want to say something. Bryce spread his hands like a host. Absolutely. Go ahead. He had no idea. Cassie looked down at the key for a moment. Then she said, thank you for the gift. I can hear it now, the careful, deliberate way she said it, like she was choosing every word with both hands. Thank you for the gift. Sharon smiled, but I can't take it. The mood changed the way air pressure changes before a storm. You felt it before you could name it. Bryce blinked twice. Sharon's smile went tight. The crowd around the car went very still. Cassie's voice steadied. She said, My dad drove me to every single appointment for 3 years in that truck over there. She pointed toward the escape. She didn't look back. 3 summers without air conditioning, she said, because the fix cost too much and he was paying for my school instead. A few nearby conversations stopped. He woke up at 5 in the morning on chemo weeks to make sure I got to school on time, she said. He sat in hospital parking garages for hours because they wouldn't let anyone under 18 into the infusion room. He sold the boat we used to fish on because you stopped paying tuition. That last one hit Sharon. I could see it. Linda's voice came out sharp. Cassie, this is not the place. Cassie didn't look at her. He missed meals. He missed sleep. He lost 30 pounds and then got back in his truck and drove to job sites because that's what he does. Her voice cracked slightly on that sentence. Just once, and then steadied again. And he never, not one single time, missed anything that mattered to me. The quiet that followed that sentence was complete. The kind of quiet where you can hear someone exhale 20 feet away. Sharon stepped closer, dropping her voice to a sharp whisper. You are embarrassing me. Cassie looked at her mother for a long moment. Then she said, quietly and without any heat at all, I was embarrassed for a long time. I think I just stopped showing it. She held up the Corvette key between 2 fingers. This is a beautiful car, she said. It is, but it doesn't make up for scan days. It doesn't make up for Christmases. It doesn't make up for calling me Emily on a birthday card when my name has never been Emily. A few people nearby made sounds they hadn't planned to make. Sharon, Cassie, stop right now. Cassie, I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just done pretending. Bryce, suddenly sensing that the live stream situation had escalated well past his control, reached out toward the key with a forced laugh. All right, he said, let's not make this a whole thing. And that is when, in what I can only describe as the universe briefly taking over, he fumbled the key. It hit the concrete. It bounced once, and then it dropped cleanly, perfectly, into the storm drain at the edge of the curb. Clink. The sound rang out like something in a cartoon. Every head turned. There was one long, horrible, beautiful second of silence. Then someone nearby laughed. Not politely. A real laugh. The kind you can't stop. Bryce dropped to his knees on the asphalt in a cream-colored linen suit and jammed his arm through the drain grate. He was still live streaming. He had apparently not turned it off. One teenager nearby whispered, his whole audience is watching this right now. Other parents were openly laughing. A woman beside me pressed her hand over her mouth and was shaking. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted something metallic. Sharon turned to me. Her voice was low and furious. This is what you wanted. And here's the part I want to tell you carefully, because I've thought about it many times since. Standing there in that parking lot, watching Bryce Holloway on his knees in an expensive suit trying to retrieve a Corvette key from a storm drain, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not anger. Not satisfaction exactly. Relief. The kind of relief that comes when you realize you are no longer afraid of someone. I looked at Sharon and I said simply, I spent a long time trying to protect her from the truth. I paused. I just stopped. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For once there was no performance available, no audience to work, no response that landed right, just silence and a man on his knees next to an expensive car she didn't own. Cassie walked over to me and took my hand. Let's go, Dad. We walked back toward the old escape. Behind us, someone in the crowd said something I didn't catch, and a few people laughed again. I did not turn around. Neither did she. I want to sit here with you for a second before I finish this story, because I think this is where it matters. If you have ever stood in a room where someone you gave years of your life to looked at you like a problem they'd already solved, you know what that parking lot walk felt like. It wasn't triumphant. It was just quiet, and quiet, after that much noise, is its own kind of thing. 3 days after graduation, I was in my kitchen eating cereal out of the box while Cassie argued with a printer about dormitory paperwork. That was the aftermath. Paperwork and grocery lists. Somebody uploaded the storm drain video online, and for about 2 weeks half of Pasadena apparently knew who I was. One customer opened the door laughing before I said hello. You're the Corvette dad, he said. I almost got back in my truck. Cassie hated the attention. People are strange, she muttered more than once. But underneath it, I think she felt something lighter, like she'd set down something heavy she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten the weight of it. Sharon texted several times. Angry first, then defensive, then something that sounded like an apology without the apology inside it. I made mistakes, one message read, but I'm still her mother. Cassie read that message, held her phone for a long moment, and then set it face down on the counter without answering. She always says it like she forgot to pick me up from soccer practice, Cassie said. Once. Move-in day at Rice came in August. The night before, Cassie stayed up late labeling storage bins and making lists while music played from her phone. Every few minutes she'd say something like, "If my roommate has a Himalayan salt lamp, I'm requesting a transfer." I laughed more that night than I had in months. After she went to bed, I walked the house turning off lights, and on every surface she thought I'd check, there was a yellow post-it note. Refrigerator. Don't skip breakfast, Dad. Coffee maker. Use the right filters. Bathroom mirror. Take your meds every day. And on the door to the garage. Love you more than football season. That one nearly undid me. We packed the Escape until the suspension sagged. Mini fridge. Engineering textbooks. Storage bins. A houseplant she insisted was low maintenance, but I would later kill within 6 weeks. Halfway to Sugarland she said, "Dad, if Mom contacts you again because of me, you don't have to protect her anymore." I kept my eyes on the road for a while. I wasn't protecting her, I said. Cassie looked at me in a way that said, yes, you were. Maybe she was right. Part of me had spent years trying to preserve a version of Sharon that Cassie could still love. But kids see clearly, eventually. There's nothing you can do to stop it. After we unloaded everything and built the bed frame and found the breaker for her room lights, we stood by the door not knowing how to end. She hugged me the way she hadn't in years, the full kind, the kind that means something. "I'll be okay," she said. "I know," I said. The drive home was quiet in the way that has nothing to do with sadness, and everything to do with something having been completed. 3 weeks later, I dropped my Escape at a shop on Spencer Highway. The AC had been broken for 3 years. I'd just gotten used to it. The mechanic looked confused when I came to pick it up. He said, "You already paid." I didn't understand what he meant. He turned the screen toward me. "Paid in full. Customer note, make sure it's cold. He won't spend money on himself." I stood there in the shop doorway. The mechanic smiled. "Your daughter?" I couldn't say anything. I nodded. I drove out of that parking lot with cold air hitting my face for the first time in 3 summers. I sat in the lot next to a dollar store and a pawn shop, and I did not move for a while. Then I flipped the sun visor down and a folded note slipped out onto my lap. It said, "You spent years keeping the weather off me when I didn't even know it was raining. Now let me do something. Love, Cassie." I cried in that parking lot. Full, embarrassing, complete crying. I'm not going to dress it up. Cancer took a lot from me. My sense of physical safety for a long time. My marriage. The version of the future I thought I understood. Some friendships that couldn't handle the weight, but it also did something I didn't expect. It made every false thing fall away quickly. People who love you when it's convenient leave. People who stay during the actual storms, those people are rare. And most of us don't tell them what they meant to us while we still can. This story taught me something I keep coming back to. The mistake most people make is waiting for the perfect moment to say thank you, not just to their kids or their parents, to anyone who stayed in a room when leaving would have been easier. The question I want to leave you sitting with tonight is this: who stayed for you? And have you told them what that was worth? Don't wait until you're alone in a mechanic's parking lot finding a note under a sun visor. Go tell them now. If this story moves something in you, drop a number in the comments. Type 1 if you think Ray made the right choices through all of this. Type 2 if you think there was a moment where he could have done something differently. Type 3 if this story reminded you of something in your own life you haven't talked about yet. I read every single one, and if you're watching at an unusual hour from somewhere I'd never expect, tell me where you are and what time it is there. Genuinely. Some of my favorite comments have been from people watching at 3 a.m. in places I can barely locate on a map. If you've made it to the end of this, you already know if this channel is for you. If it is, subscribe. I put everything into these stories. Every single one. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston, Texas to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.